Hello again, Mr. Deegan here with another edition of VidNotes videos. We're on to lesson 5 of unit 5, and we're talking about revolutions, not in France, not in America, but in Latin America. And we're going to talk about this area of the world in the Western Hemisphere. We're going to focus specifically on Haiti in 1804, Mexico in 1821, Colombia and Venezuela in 1819 and 1830. And who helped these revolts? These three men. Toussaint Louverture was the former slave who freed Haiti from French rule. Simon Bolivar was the Creole who freed the northern part of South America. And Father Miguel Hidalgo was the Catholic priest, the rebellious priest, that is, who freed Mexico from Spanish rule. We're going to talk about these men and the Latin American Revolution now. And our guiding question is, how is Latin America freed from European control? Where is Latin America? So we have a map of the world, and in red you see where Latin America is located. It is in Central America, and that includes the Caribbean islands found in the Caribbean Sea, as well as South America. These two areas make up Latin America. Latin America shares common languages. Spanish, Portuguese, and French are spoken in Latin America. In green on this map, you see all of the areas of Latin America where Spanish is spoken. In orange, Portuguese, and this is Brazil. Predominantly Brazilians speak Portuguese, and you see a smattering of French spoken in Latin America as well. All three of these languages have Latin roots, which is why it's named Latin America. Latin America also shares a common religion, and that religion is the Christian denomination of Catholicism. Here's a map that shows the world distribution of Catholics in the year 2000, and you see 42% of all Catholics in the world are found in Latin America. In Europe, there are 27% of the Catholics in the world, followed by Africa with 12%, Asia 10%, and North America only has 7% of all of the world's Catholics. And the number one Catholic, you might say, is the Pope. And Pope Francis, our current Pope, is actually from Latin America. He was born in Argentina. Latin America shares an economy. They have a mining economy where people mine precious metals for export. Precious metals, gold, silver, etc. And you see some mining photographs here. European merchants in Latin America set up colonial outposts. And I'm going to point out where the 5 most important outposts are now with my pointer. Havana, Cuba. Cuba is just south of Florida here, this island nation, and Havana is on the western side, this dot right here. Next, we have Mexico City, Mexico. Here's the country of Mexico, just south of the US, and Mexico City is in central Mexico right here. Lima, Peru. Peru is on the west coast of South America, and Lima is this city here on the west part. Then you have Sao Paulo, Brazil. Here's the ginormous country of Brazil in South America, and Sao Paulo is southeast on the coast. And lastly, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Argentina is a southern country within South America, and Buenos Aires is located right here to the east, again, close to the Atlantic Ocean. That's why it's a colonial outpost. These were places of trade that later become cities. When were the revolts in Latin America? Well, these revolts in Latin America happened after the Enlightenment, in Europe. They happened after the American Revolution, and the revolts happened after and during the French Revolution of liberty, equality, fraternity. So let's take a look at a timeline of all of these different revolts in Latin America. The first one happens on the island of Haiti in 1791. Toussaint Louverture leads an army of former slaves. Mexico happens in 1810. Father Hidalgo gives his famous El Grito de Lora speech, and Mexico wins independence from Spain. Argentina revolts in 1816. Colombia follows in 1819. Simón Bolívar surprising the Spanish. Then Venezuela is freed in 1821, again with Simón Bolívar leading the charge. And lastly, Brazil is freed from Portugal in 1822, and Dom Pedro becomes emperor of a freed Brazil. How was Latin America's social structure organized? Well, it wasn't like the Third Estate in France. You didn't have clergy number one, number two, nobility, and everyone else as the Third Estate. Instead, you had castas. And casta is a Spanish term for mixed race people who appeared after the arrival of the Europeans. Latin America is a very diverse and mixed population. Native Americans, Europeans, and Africans had never coexisted in the same place before the intermingling of these people led to new groups. And more than just a racial classification, these castas affected taxes, affected employment, and the lower castes had to pay higher taxes in Latin America. And by 1821, there were over 100 different classifications of mixed race people. And you see a painting of a mixed race child with parents of different races. Latin America had a rigid meaning not flexible, social class structure based on ethnicity. So here are the four major castas. First, we have the Peninsulares. The Peninsulares were born in Europe and held the highest offices in government in Latin America, and they were called viceroys, these high office positions. And they made up only 0.1% of Latin American population. Next, we have the Creoles, and they were born in Latin America to parents who were from Europe. And these made up about 23% of Latin American population. Then, further down the social ladder, you had the mestizos. These were people who were born in Latin America, but they had parents of mixed European and Native American blood. And this made up about 30% of Latin America. Lastly, on the social ladder, you have the mulatto. And the mulatto was born in Latin America, but they had mixed race parents, parents of both African and Native American ancestry. And they made up about 15% of Latin American population. And the structure was rigid. If you were a mulatto, you could not hope to hold high government office and become a peninsulare. You were born in a certain casta and you stayed there for life. Let's talk about some specific revolts. First, in the island nation of Haiti. Where is Haiti? Let's look at our globe here. Haiti is a tiny island in the Caribbean. You see, it is the western part of an island known as Hispaniola. Oh, that's where Christopher Columbus explored. Haiti is the west point here. The revolt in Haiti went from 1791 to 1804. Until 1791, it was a colony owned by France, and a former slave named Toussaint Louverture led a successful slave rebellion in 1791. Here he is. He was called the Black Napoleon because he idolized Napoleon Bonaparte as a leader. Haiti abolished slavery in 1798, and It won independence from France in 1804. Toussaint led these slaves. He defeated the armies of three major European powers, Spain, France, and Britain. And more lives were lost during the Haiti revolt than any other revolution in Latin America. Why did the world pay attention to the revolt in a tiny island country? Well, this was something to pay attention to because of who did it. Toussaint Louverture, a former slave, he educated himself. He could read and write, and he started this revolution. He said, "I was born a slave, but nature gave me the soul of a free man." He used Enlightenment ideas. And it was also something to pay attention to because, in addition to Toussaint, Haiti was such an important player on the world market. Saint-Domingue, which is the capital of Haiti, produced 60% of the Earth's coffee and 40% of the Earth's sugar. So it was an important economic center. And look at this population difference. There were 32,000 whites and 500,000 blacks. There were 16 times more blacks than whites in Haiti. So you see how a revolt, a successful revolt, could be possible. Let's talk about Mexico. How did Mexico in Latin America win independence from Spain? The Mexican independence movement lasted from 1810 until 1821, and the leader of that movement was Miguel Hidalgo. Here he is. He was an angry, rebellious Catholic priest. And he was born to a Creole family in Mexico, so he is not in the highest social class. His father was a hacienda manager, meaning a slave driver, and Hidalgo was educated at the University of Mexico. He learned Latin, Nahuatl, which is a Native American language, and French. And he read the French Enlightenment works and was inspired by them. He read what was forbidden by the Spanish Catholic Church. That's why he's called rebellious. And he became the dean of the University of Mexico and was fired for studying the Enlightenment. That was forbidden. Again, he was rebellious. He questioned the absolute rule of the Spanish monarchy, which was a no-no, and he lived and worked with members of the lower class, with the mestizos and the mulattoes, and that eventually gets him into trouble. He was found not guilty when he was tried in the Spanish Inquisition. What are the causes of this Mexican independence movement? Spanish mercantilism, there's that M word. Spain exploited Mexico for her labor and resources, and also drought and famine in Mexico. A lack of rain led to a poor crop, which meant there was less food, and Spain refuses to release stores of grain in Mexico. This causes the lower classes especially to get angry. When you're hungry and you don't like your ruler, you tend to revolt. Just like in France, this is what happens in Mexico. Miguel Hidalgo gives an impassionate speech in Dolores. It's called the Grito de Dolores, the cry of Dolores, Mexico. He holds a Catholic mass for 300 people and encourages these people to revolt against the viceroys in the name of Catholicism. And unfortunately, Hidalgo is caught and he is eventually killed by Spanish forces. But it is his example that leads Mexico to independence, eventually getting that in 1821. From Mexico to South America. How did South American countries win independence from Europe? One man led the charge. This man, Simón Bolívar, nicknamed the Liberator. Liberate, to free. He was a Creole. He was of mixed ancestry who led efforts in North South America. He led independent efforts in both Colombia in 1819 and Venezuela in 1821. And these two countries in northern South America are outlined in green. Simón Bolívar, the Liberator, leads South American independence. How does the U.S. respond to Latin America's revolutions? In 1823, President James Monroe shows his support for a free Latin America. He does that by introducing the Monroe Doctrine. President James Monroe is the 5th president of the United States, and he is from this area. He lives right next to Thomas Jefferson in Charlottesville. So Monroe's doctrine is important, and we have a local connection to it. Here's Monroe. Here's a picture of his doctrine. Monroe basically says to Europe, you must allow North America and South America to be free and independent. He draws a line, puts his foot down. Europe says, what do you mean by off limits? Here are his words in the Monroe Doctrine. When interests of the United States are involved, that the American continents, by the free and independent condition which they have assumed and maintained, are henceforth not to be considered as subjects for future colonization by any European powers. In other words, hey, Europe, it's personal. The United States would regard as a threat to its own peace and any attempt by European powers to impose their system on any independent nation in the Western Hemisphere. The United States is showing strength here with the Monroe Doctrine. When you're done with that, we are done for lesson 5. We have but our summary questions remaining. Please fill those out. And when you're done, you are done with lesson 5. Until next time, this is Mr. Deegan signing off.